Welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Semo?
We are on Wheel of Time. Memory of Light, hopefully getting through the last battle today, though we do have some comments to go to first. But yeah, we're trudging along. We'll start with Matt and see how far we get.
Yeah, when I was making notes for this last 60 pages of the chapter, I was trying to be as judicious as I could of, do I really need to say this? Is this really important? Let's just hurry up and get on with it. So hopefully we will be able to finish today with this chapter. All right, but you slackers have finally had comments. So let's see here.
Uh, the Demandred showdown surprised me because my impression was that Gawain was the most skilled swordsman. Galad had the looks and the white cloaks. He also struggled against Valda, which in retrospect must be taken as a praise for Valda, it seems. Land had Nynaeve, Valkyrie Kingdom looks, and just being an absolute Chad. I'd say Giga Chad, but yeah. Gawain had the swordsmanship. Bro was defeating several warders at a time, several ring bearers. Felt like the subtle final, you're not good enough, F you to him to have him third in skill. Uh well, we're gonna get to we'll analyze this more when we get to Lan,
Yeah,
because Lan had an advantage that
yep.
wasn't about skill, and so we'll expound on that when we get there. But Galad, in the third book, when you kind of first really meet these two together, it was implied that Galad was the better swordsman.
Hmm.
But what I actually way back going 20 something years when we were waiting for the new books to come out every 2 years, I remember thinking as soon as I knew Galad had become a White Cloak and Gawain had stayed with the tower, I was kind of expecting a showdown between the two of them at some point and to see who was the better, but also a showdown that ended in reconciliation. And that would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, it does make me realize that your comment there makes me realize there is a progression in the three showdowns. Because I commented that I think it's fitting that Galad doesn't say a word in his section. Once he says,
Well, and
fight
that's always
me,
been Gawain's weakness. He might have been the better swordsman, but he
you
was easily
yes,
poked and prodded. Yeah.
you could tell from his point of view that he did not have good awareness because he had too much awareness. I last time I ranted about awareness, it was the obliviousness of not paying attention to what's going on around you. You can have the inverse as well of where you're over analyzing everything, you're overthinking everything, and then that kills your awareness. Galad was a step up, but he wasn't quite good enough because he wasn't where Lan is, which we will hopefully get to.
Well, and
Um,
also with Gawain, there was he thought he had the wild card that wasn't the wild card he thought it was because Demandred knew what it was. So obviously it's something he's dealt with probably in war during the war for power.
yeah, which makes me wonder where the Foxhead medallion came from because it's clearly mimicking a weave in existence, which makes me wonder then, was it created during the breaking or was it created during the War of Power? Um, because Demandred assumes it's a weave, not that it's a Tarine Grial.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
That
I
that
was
it is
talking
a
about the
weave that is
rings
placed on
with
him.
Gawain.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about Galad and his having the medallion.
No. Gawain went in with his plan of using the rings, and Demandred knew exactly what they were. He names them. I can't remember what he called it, something of shadows or something.
Right.
And so obviously it's something that he's dealt with before, where Gawain thought he was
Well,
pulling
and
a
that's
sneaky.
even more interesting because then you have to wonder then where did those rings come from? And I wonder if it was because we know
Issued.
Ishamiel
Yeah.
was the one who sent them across, then was he also still able to influence them and teach them when the empire was being founded?
Well, and it'd be
All right.
exactly how he fought because he wouldn't have
Yeah.
done the fighting himself. He would have just encouraged other people to do it
Yes.
better.
Oh yes, our hiccup. Yeah, but yeah, we were definitely cutting off things there because we're always worried about getting the one time we got a strike, and we're still not sure if it was what we said in the episode or if it was the title of the episode
Or the cover art.
or the cover art. Because all you did, literally every source we cited and talked about in that was directly from the CDC.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Around 46 minutes, he cites the argument of how good can exist without the benevolent God, and it echoes with me. This is somewhat unrelated to what, but I heard Tim Pool mimicking leftists and proclaiming more on the right side of history after the Trump triumph, but I don't think he is ironic, and I don't agree with that framing at all. History's natural right course is a descent towards decay, chaos, and entropy. Civilization and goodness is fragile. It requires effort, the will of the man to steer in the storm, the courage to be on the wrong side of entropy, which is encapsulated in this quote of how can good exist if not for God?
I'll let you comment on that one because
Oh, I assumed you were. I was gonna let you go. Okay. Um, I I think this does go to our go. If you haven't, go dig up our Sunday school episodes. It was my whole point of why I started with the Old Testament, why I started at the beginning with Genesis, because the Torah is a very revolutionary, just from a historical perspective, a very revolutionary work. It is not an evolution, it is a revolution. And the idea that, no, the purpose of man is to instill order in the chaos of nature,
Mhm.
because that is what is best for humanity as a whole. That is what is going to let people not just survive, but thrive.
And
So
see,
I like your framing there about balance and bringing order to the natural entropy, the natural chaos of the universe.
well, and this is where I'll go to a different framing, and I think this might be a misunderstanding towards what I actually
Mhm.
am trying to espouse. Is I don't entropy is natural. The second law of thermodynamics shows that in the physical form. But one reason I love the Wheel of Time is the concept of cyclical natures of everything. We talk about, well, did God create the universe or was it the Big Bang? And the answer and the argument is, well, if it was the Big Bang, what was before that?
Mhm.
But the answer to the other side of that is, if God created it, what created God? And so we are expanding. The universe is ever expanding, but we don't know if it's going to end in just complete entropy, the big fire, or what, or if it's going to recycle into something new. We don't know that, and we don't have the billions of years to figure it out. Just like fire burns something down to ash, the ash becomes the next thing. So everything is cyclical in nature. It just tends towards entropy. But we, as human beings, for the first 30 some odd years of our lives, are actually order creating machines.
Mhm.
And the same with plants. So plants take sunlight, they take carbon from the air, they take oxygen from the air, and they create carbohydrate. And then they take other minerals from the soil to add all these other things. Ruminating animal eats plant, breaks it back down again into something easily digestible, reforms it, and we eat the meat, we break it down into something else, and then we reform it into our bodies, and then it comes out as waste at some point, which is broken down by bacteria and vermin, which in turn keeps the cycle going. So, yeah, everything is cyclical. If you think of cyclical natures, actually a lot of organic systems make sense, and a lot of the complexity kind of goes away. Things like circadian rhythms, like biorhythms. Uh, Again, we don't know what the biorhythm of the universe is because we don't have time.
Mhm. Um, yes, I do have a thing for Abel, and I can't let it go because um
Because the show ruined him.
I wasn't even thinking about that. Thank you for bringing that up. While you're at it, why don't you give me a nice paper cut and pour some lemon juice on it? Because when that idea first popped into my head, way back whenever the heck it was, where we were talking about this in one of our spoiler section, and the idea of Abel being the one to have the showdown with Demandred, it just seemed perfect to me because you have Matt, the general, on the other side, And then along comes, the guy who taught Matt how to fight. And, one of the many long running arguments in the nerd forums is who's actually the best fighter, taking away power. And a lot of times the argument boils down to Lan versus Matt.
Yeah, and I almost wonder because Sando took some freedoms. I, the simplest answer, if you just took Occam's razor to the whole series, would have been Matt against Demandred.
Mhm.
They're generaling it out, and all of a sudden, just fate takes them together. He's
And
got the
he
fox
has the
head.
original
He's
medallion.
got the
Mhm.
original medallion to equalize the playing field, and now it's mano y mano.
He
And
he
that
can
would have been the
actually
simple answer.
banter with Demandred. That
Mhm.
would actually help him. The
Mhm.
banter would help him of Demandred in his craziness of you get this we get this point of view from Taim in the last section here of holy crap, Demandred's gone native. He's just gone nuts. He believes everything he's saying and he's crazy. And Matt being able to banter would fuel that and give him an edge. And so yeah, the simplest answer, the most traditional story element would be, Matt gets in there somehow and says, "All right, well, I guess I'll have to do it myself."
Yeah, and you could
Um,
have just you could have just well, I would have loved an accidental encounter like he did
mm,
with Cooladin, where they're jockeying around the battlefield fighting each other, and it's a basically even fight, and
yeah.
the Sharon Ring and Matt's Death Guard end up in the same spot, and Demandred's like, "Oh, you're loose there and in disguise," and he's like, "Nope, I'm just a farm boy."
Nope. Yep. I'm just a gambler.
Hmm.
Um, And I mean, we kind of start off there because we start off again with Matt feeling the pulse of the battle by being
Hmm.
in the middle of the battle, which is very not Matt like.
Well,
Um,
this one, okay, so I'm going to be a little forgiving here because I see what Sanderson was trying to do.
yeah.
He was using Matt was using this to get the Death Guard into the battle.
Hmm.
And so, but if he never did the pulse of the battle part, if he had just had this be Matt's entry into
Yes.
battle,
Yes.
that would have probably fixed everything right there because he needed the Death Guard. He needed them to be doing their thing. And this was how he got him back in there. And this would have been the perfect way to lead him into an encounter that we were just talking about. So I think this was actually probably part of the notes. And I don't think Sanderson knew quite what to do with it in some ways.
Could be because this to me is why he started off so badly with really all of the chapters in that first book. It gets slightly better in Towers, but those first chapters of Matt are just awful. And it comes down to a fundamental lack of understanding of Matt as a character. When you right here in this opening bit where he's sitting here thinking about the battle and what it's doing and how he needs to feel the pulse of everything. No, he doesn't. He doesn't need to fight to do that. We have seen that time and time again. That's what makes him so special. He doesn't need to fight to feel the pulse, and he certainly wouldn't want to, but he would
Mhm.
grudgingly, but he would
Well,
if
and
if he had to.
you could have even had it where he had like a command center set up and he had convinced the Death Guard to stick around for a minute to protect him. And something disrupted that and they kept having to move the
Mm-hmm.
command center, but kept ending up in skirmishes along the way.
You know what? I because this does come up, and this is to your point, to credit where it's due, this is one of the better Matt sections
Mm-hmm.
from the Sanderson books, from his writing. This is a good section where we start here, which is for me in the first edition here, it's at the bottom of page 749, where we left off last time after Rand in the Dark One. And it's a pretty good both synopsis of the overall battlefield, and we get it from Matt's perspective, and it's pretty well written and all that. And in this, it's either in this one or it's later. He's thinking about how, by golly, I'm not going to end up, you know, this isn't my end because there are too many dances to dance and, you know, too many women to cuddle with. Well, one woman in particular is basically, I'm paraphrasing his thought. And to your point about being caught up in the battle and about trying to get the Death Watch guards into the fight, but then also not make it a suicidal fight, he would feel like he owes Kared something
Hmm.
because he clearly loves Tuan and thinks about her a lot. That should have been his thought process of I owe him for coming after her and then for successfully getting her back to Ibudar and keeping her alive. I owe him. That would be Matt's thinking of, I don't want to get into the thick of this. And as the general, I shouldn't necessarily get into the thick of this, but I owe him. That would be Matt's thinking.
Yeah.
That's if you really understood the character, that would be the train of thought you ultimately got to. And oh, okay, this is how I get Matt into the fight. Well, that was a thank you for that, ideals. That was a wonderful segue into the actual sections we're getting into. Did you have any other thoughts on that opening Matt bit?
Uh, no, I think we kind of have to take these as a whole because
Mm-hmm.
we're this only all this does was give you a little bit of why he's there, but also
Yeah.
a little bit of a third person perspective of other things that are happening at the
Mm-hmm.
time. But it's a really short
Well,
section.
that
that-
and it goes right into for me 751. I a couple times ago when we got into one of these sections when they were still going through the waste, I was him and Han of I don't know how to say what I want to say because I just instinctively I don't like these Ulver sections and I wasn't sure why. And then we get to it here on 751 where he has this thought of, he had to practice being good with the ladies, quote, or he'd end up as hopeless as Matt. Where the heck did this come from? And I remember it back in the other sections, and it didn't hit me of that specifically is what is so annoying here because now we haven't had any point of views from Ulver. The I think the one time we got it was at the very end of is it Towers where he opens the note and reads it? Is it the end of is that that's the end of the
yeah, I
last
think
book?
so. Yeah, yeah.
Because we start this book with Camelin being overrun by Trollocs. And so that's the first and only point of view of Ulver we've had. But everything we've seen about him is he worships Matt. Matt is, and it's totally understandable because Matt understands Ulver. Matt identifies with Ulver, and Ulver has no father. Ulver's father
Mhm.
was killed, and then the rest of his family was. And and so he pretty much worships Matt. So where the hell is this coming from? This
I
doesn't make any sense.
I can see it if you think abstractly from what Ulver would have experienced, because remember, Ulver was cuddling on Rozelle's bosom, and Tom was canoodling her too, and all
Unless
these
this
things
this
that
is
and every
yes,
experience he's kind of had with Matt was either under Tylan or stumbling over his feet with Tuan.
but I wouldn't think he would have picked up on the all the subtleties of what was going on with Thailand and how everyone was making fun of him. I
Well,
don't
that's
know
that's where you would think he's bad with women, because he would always try to flirt with Roselle, and she would shoo him off. Matt would.
the to me the hopeless as Matt only works if he is specifically talking about the fact that he settled down.
Hmm.
And so if there was an element of that, of it, so it should be. So my problem here is that this is the terribleness of why modern movies, why modern writing sucks, is because modern writers instinctively lift others up by pushing others down. You have to lift someone or some other group. What is it? Kendi, who straight up says the cure for past discrimination is current discrimination.
I was going to go in that direction with Matt here, because this whole thing didn't need to be there. I think is the bigger point. We can kind of try to justify it all the way around, but his final answer is uh, that wouldn't stop him from squeezing some sympathy from Sital once they
Mm-hmm.
were back.
Mm-hmm.
He needed to practice doing things like that, or he'd end up as hopeless as Matt. So actually, we've talked so much about how Matt's misunderstood and he's actually masculine. And that's a very feminine thing to do, to squeeze
Hmm,
sympathy out of
that's a good point.
the other woman, or the woman. And I think this is the disconnect here, because this is what a lot of women in the social sciences especially think, that men think like they do. And in order to not be hopeless, he needs to learn how to do these little things.
Hmm. That's a good point that I hadn't picked up on, is that, yeah, we have kind of teased and pondered and speculated on Sanderson and his personality, and that is a very feminine trait that
Which Jordan did very well in describing relationships between like Nynaeve and Egwene and Matt,
mhm,
where they're misunderstanding him, and it's very clear that it's a misunderstanding of him.
yes.
Yeah.
And this is why even female fans would roll their eyes when, the pre-wokies would get upset over Jordan's portrayal of women, is he did such a good job of not making them bad guys. It was clear it was a misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
It was, they weren't necessarily, it wasn't that the women were the villains of the story. It was just, this is life.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things we see in everyday life. One of the tropes is
Hmm.
when, the wife is sick, no, she does everything still, and when the husband is
Hmm.
sick, he's, oh, woe is me, and da da da. And like, you know, maybe he's not trying to squeeze sympathy. Maybe he just waits till he's that sick before he says anything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two answers to that. Now you can parse out which guy is which over time if you watch them long enough. But yeah, maybe if I get sick enough to say anything, that means I'm really, really, really sick.
Yeah. My other problem with that opening here is, and once again, this scene goes on for too long. It's,
Hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4 full pages here. Could have done it in half the time. Uh, but my other problem with that opening is then it ruins um one of the best, maybe the only good moment in this whole storyline, this whole Fael Olver section that we've been trudging through here, is the very end. The Viendi Setovia Saga, Olver whispered, unsheathing his knife. With a cry, he threw himself at the woman in white and rammed his knife into her lower back. Olver saves the day here by quoting Matt and doing a very Matt thing of, oh crap, this is a bad situation and this is going to bring all the attention on me, but time to roll the dice because, oh, this is not good,
Hmm.
right? It's a very Matt thing to do, and huzzah for Oliver, for being the hero here, but you kind of ruined it with how you opened.
Hmm.
You really weakened what otherwise was an awesome moment, because that is a clear connection to Matt. The fact that not only did he say time to roll the dice, but he said it in the old tongue.
Hmm. Well, I think this is where this is where someone taking over your work is bad, because I think
Mm.
one of the things he was trying to do was harness some of the Rand Matt Perrin, oh, if it was Perrin, he'd understand women kind of
Yeah,
dynamic.
yeah,
And that's how it played off to me. So I kind of just let it flow. But now that we've talked about it in detail, I'm pissed off about it. So
yeah. Um, then you get some Aes Sedai, and Egwene shows up being all awesome again. Um, don't have any thoughts on that. We get back to Ptolemais where they're in the cavern. And we get another section here that uh to your point, if we hadn't had the dumb earlier, then this would have worked. Similar situation here of this back and forth between Ptolemais and Dinnel. Uh, uh, of sorry, my lord, that was a joke. Dinnel blinked. That, yes, that was a joke. Yes, you have an interesting sense of humor, my lord. If he hadn't done it so badly and so over the top in those first sections of Ptolemais, where you're like, who is this person? This is not the Ptolemais we have seen for you know half a dozen books. That actually would work and would be funny.
Well, and not only that, if we hadn't seen it in other literature or film and done better, data
Mhm.
from Star Trek: The Next
Yeah.
Generation, that's basically what he's doing here.
Mhm. Yeah. The only there was an interesting tidbit here to me that kind of jumped out. Maybe it's just it's not necessarily anything important. It's just one of those things that make you go, hmm, which is why the Wheel of Time is so great and so infinitely rereadable. Is Tominus has this thought: what kind of man knew of caverns that could not be reached except by the one power? Because they don't tell us who. It's just some Ashaman. Tominus
Mhm.
doesn't know who it was, so we don't know who found this cavern and brought them here.
I thought it was made clear that it was Andril who was making the gateways after he did the big lava thing.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it
And
if we
and
were given a
didn't we
hint
even
there,
get something about Andril saying he knows a spot because he's one of the few people that's been there?
but I didn't think it was here.
I
So
thought
we'll
that's
have
what
to
they were alluding to.
if somebody knows, we may have to go back and dig at that because the most likely answer to me of how someone could know this cavern is I think this is under the plateau, right? This is under the Polov Heights is where they are. I'm pretty sure because Talmanis talks about how he imagines he can hear the battle going on, but they're so far underground he can't. He can't actually hear it. It's just a feeling. So
Yeah,
the
well, I think the wording there is important because
mhm,
we get from Andrew's point of view, at least at the very minimum, that he has gone to a lot of crazy places and a lot of places that nobody else has gone. And his wording there, what kind of man would know of this place?
yeah,
I think those are supposed to play together. You're supposed to connect those two in your mind. And I did personally.
but if someone was really strong in Earth, they could know this because
That
we
this is
see that
true.
from
Yeah. Yeah.
Egwene, where she's able to find veins of metal in the Great Hunt, and the Sanshin are all excited about that. But my other thought was, huh, what if the Ashaman who found this place was a dreamer,
Hmm.
and they found this place in the wandering the dream? Because you can go anywhere in the dream. Of do we actually have an Ashaman dreamer that we don't know about? Because that would be kind of interesting and cool. And you have to think it's all coming back just in different ways. So
Well, just from
maybe,
probability standpoint, you'd have to have some Ashaman that had the talent because
yeah.
we find out because of the Aiel how many channelers actually have that talent. They just didn't know about it,
Hmm.
which would lead to a genetic component because the fact that it's not prevalent in the White Tower, it's not prevalent amongst the Shanshan, but
Hmm.
we get it in the Wise Ones actually pretty regularly. Maybe if I was to guess based on how they talk about it, somewhere around 1 in 100, 1 in 50, somewhere around there.
Yeah. All right. Well, then we get a Fael point of view after Oliver stabs the channeler and all heck breaks loose, and then Deus Ex Band of the Red Hand, Harnan and Vannon show up to save Fael. Um,
Yep. And we get the tell us because you couldn't show us properly about why they were scared.
yep, yep. There's definitely an element of there's quite a few moments of you're telling us when you should have showed us in this last part of the
Or just
chapter
done
here.
without that whole stupid
Um,
section.
or done without the whole stupid section. But more interestingly to
Well,
me,
it's so forced because he needed Vannon and
yep,
Manvidin to, or not Manvidin, who was with Vannon?
Harnan,
Harnan. He needed those two to come in from the
yep,
outside. He couldn't have them already with the band when they were captured. So
yeah, he needed them to help the chaos so that Oliver's roll of the dice would come up, sixes because unbeknownst to him, Harnan and Vannon were amongst the prisoners and they were already organizing a breakout. So that's how they're able to succeed here. But it is a little too much Deus Ex Machina for my liking. What I do like though is there's a sequence of events here in this Fail section that to me and I don't know how much of this was notes and meant to be all along and how much of this was Sanderson and or Harriet. But I've talked about how there seemed to be a concerted effort from the beginning of Sanderson taking over to rehabilitate Fail in the eyes of the fans,
Hmm.
because he first was a fan, and part of, not just a fan, a reader, but part of the fan community. He knew the arguments and the discussions online. And so he would have known that a lot of fans didn't like Fail. And this section right here is why she desperately needed a rehabilitation, because you get this moment here where, yes, the Deus Ex Machina is dumb, but then Fael groaned, imagining the scene. The yell that Fael had heard was a yell of surprise, and it was what had drawn the bear thing to attack, blah, blah, blah. Well, there was no going back to that moment. So there's a moment of self reflection and, well, crap, I screwed that up.
Hmm.
And then later, you get this great moment. Um, where'd it go? Um, oh, I think I wrote down the wrong numbers. Oh, nope, there it is. Page 763 for me. So it's the very end of this Fael section. Um, where she knows she's running off as a distraction. She knows she's eventually going to be caught, and she has this thought: she would have to take her knife to herself lest they torture out of her what she'd done with the horn. Just no hesitation, no nothing. It's, I got to do what I got to do. And this is right after she apologized to Ulver. So this is a great moment for Fail and shows you her true character. Not not the bits on the outside, not the facade she sometimes puts up that annoys us so much, but this is why we had to go through that journey in the first two
Hmm.
Sanderson books, is so we could get to this point, and you would love her for what she's doing, and you would have that emotional impact for what appears to be the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah, and I think this is where these the we'll call it the more wokey critiques of the book are is when we have early Fael and Perrin, they both were stupid
Mm,
in their masculine and feminine ways. But we're willing to forgive Fael because she's redeemed herself. That side of the aisle doesn't forgive anybody.
yeah. And then we finally get a really good, solid Logain point of view where you've got some good, complex character development and motivation. But is it too little, too late? Because we've complained about this, of we have been getting the aura of glory to come.
Hmm.
Min has that vision. I think that's pretty early on in book 5 is when she has that vision and goes to, because I think book 5 is when she shows up in the White Tower and is dressed up as Elmendrada.
Yeah, but the problem is this, especially the way this section ends, it's inconsistent with the Logain that rescued the Black Tower. Because now that last paragraph, he's thinking about becoming a tyrant.
I don't think it's inconsistent. I think it's, there are too many gaps. We, the reader, have to connect too many dots. We, it's not that we are connecting dots. We have to make our own dots to connect, right? To draw the picture properly. So it makes sense, and we knew from Andrel's points of view that Logain had changed because of all the turning attempts, because of how the strain, and we knew that it had kind of broken Amarin, is that he too was different.
Hmm.
That it kind of broken his brain a little bit. And Logain, we know from Andrel's point of view, he's different. He's a little darker. But we actually needed some Logain points of view to show us, again, one of the great things that RJ did so well is he would show, but sometimes he would reverse that, which is difficult to do and pull off well. Is he would tell us and then he would show us, and it would make the showing all the better,
Yeah, I
right?
guess I guess what you could have done in his mind was had basically mirror Egwene's arc with the Shanshan. Never again, never again, never again.
Or
With this power, never again.
bring back because we've seen her point of view before, is Gabrielle.
Mm,
Is it could have been from her point of view of wrestling with these feelings that she has for him, because you see it from Loghain's point of view in these couple of sections of his of being overly suspicious of her, and is she starting to get darker and darker of, no, those aren't real feelings, she's just trying to manipulate me, she knows that I can feel through the bond, so she's faking it. And then, no, dummy, it's real when he has to flee to Mandrid and he comes back to her for healing. And I think that's part of the weakness of this whole thread is smushing these two scenes together, is that it's understandable he would go after Demandrid
mhm.
because he wants to be Rand, and he desperately wants that sangreal, but it's too rushed. So that when he comes back and he has that moment with Gabriella of, no, I was a fool, I'm not going to do that again, it doesn't land.
Yeah, I guess he's going for kind of a Lucifer moment where he
Hmm.
climbs to the throne and gets tossed back down, and that's the growing moment. But like you said, it's not fleshed out very
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then we switch to, we saw from Leanne's point of view Egwene showing back up on the battle. Now we switch back to that with Egwene's point of view, and um, I know I was talking about this, explaining some history things to the wife and kids. So we were talking about Korea and its kind of sad history of the fact that the Republic of Korea is really just very recently a real democracy. It was a fascist state in the first couple of decades of its existence, and we uh the great Dr. Park, my first advisor in the history department and East Asian studies professor, uh, Park, so obviously Korean, and he would talk about in the Cold War history is he was a son of a beach, but he was our son of a beach. and and that's what I was thinking of with this Egwene section is, yeah, she's a bitch, but she's our son of a bitch.
I've
Because
gotten that from
she
employees.
wrecks it.
You're an
Yeah.
asshole, but you're our asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would add to this is I love that Lewin is there watching her back, being her warder. I would have loved it more. Where the heck is her freaking husband? He
Yeah.
should be there guarding her back. I would have loved it if Lewin is guarding Egwene's back and Bale is guarding Lewin's back. Just
Or
for an
it
added
could have
element
been
there.
the battle could have been on the river, and when they got in trouble, they bailed Omened it.
It just, much like with my griping about some of these points of view that he shifts to, and they go too long, and he should shift to more. They should be shorter with more, so we get more of that. And again, it's so some of the characters just kind of disappear. Um, we're about to get a moment of that here when we go back to Rand, and we don't actually see, we don't actually see Davram Bashir and his wife die in a hopeless charge. We just Rand. It's a sentence, and I know some of that was purposely for the shock value, but it can't all be for that. Sometimes we need a little more, right? Um, and this would have been one of those moments. Um, I didn't have any thoughts about the next scene. Is actually Ilya's point of view with her and Rain
Yeah, I
going
did have a
through
little
looking for
thought of that
wounded.
because it's the disconnect. Rain is giving the speech that I want to give to uh, people who are indoctrinated through academia about masculinity,
Hmm.
because he's basically, if you take way of the leaf of just passiveness and someone needs to fight for us, that's kind of like that masculine feminine dynamic where it's maybe I'm not violent, but if I don't understand that, as Jordan calls it, the person who who is dangerous but doesn't use it unless it's needed. That kind of person. If that person doesn't exist, then evil will always win.
Mm.
And he's giving her the speech of that needs to be a thing. It may not be our thing,
Yeah,
but it needs to be a thing, and we need to support it.
yeah. I didn't want to go down the politics rabbit hole, but one of the things it made me think of was we've talked about, I think, one of his best moments in the campaign, which may have been something of a turning point for people's perception of Trump, because he actually won suburban women by like 6 points. It was like 53 to 47 for the suburban women demographic this election. That's a big effing deal for how much he struggled there. And I think one of the turning points may have been when he was asked about what he's going to do with the Ukraine war was, I just want people to stop dying.
Yeah, that was
You know?
that was his best moment the entire
And
campaign.
and it made me think of, I wish I could remember because I'd send people to it, a YouTube video from one of the history people I sometimes watch, um, the history and military channels, talking about, I can't even remember the name of it, but the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. It's a big effing boat. And the Ukrainians somehow sunk in. It's still a little fuzzy how they did it. They may have had some CIA help. Um, but there was a lot of cheering over that. And okay, yeah, that was a victory for them. But and the guy who made the video is very much a pro Ukraine, pro the West should be supporting them. But guys, let's remember something like 300 Russian sailors died here.
Mm-hmm.
And he quoted from a letter that one of those sailors had sent back recently, and somehow it had made it online. And so he quoted from that, and I thought that's important, and that links that of it's not so black and white. It's not so we everything Ukraine needs everything it can have so that we can defeat the evil Russians, or no, Ukraine gets absolutely nothing. Ignore it. Just guys, it's not that black or white.
Mm-hmm.
And at the most fundamental level, but in the space between those two extremes is I just want people to stop dying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what Rain is saying is I wish it wasn't like this, but it is. So this was one of those great moments of we have not seen these people in forever and we never got points of view from them. But this is why I've been griping that we need more shorter POV sections because this was a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we switch back to Oliver and he finds Bella the Wonder Horse. And
Well, wasn't Fail just on Bella the Wonder Horse?
yeah, and she did a circle because she was trying to get out of the camp and she got cut off and she had to circle back around. And when she got back to basically back where she started, she saw another better horse that was saddled. And so that is when she stuffed stuff into the sack and gave the horn to Oliver, and then she jumped on this other horse and took off. And so now Oliver is hiding under the wagon, but Trollocs can smell and they find him. And then he jumps on Bella the Wonder Horse. And there was a moment here, though. My only thought with this section was Bella the Wonder Horse became a running joke in the fan community. And so I had to wonder here, wait, is this not actually a joke? Is the creator is Bella actually a Tavarin or something? It made me wonder, was there anything in Jordan's mind or the notes that made, or was he just, because he would do this sometimes, is he was a lurker in some of the forums, and so then he would sometimes play to the fans and their theories, sometimes as fan service, but a lot of times just to be an asshole and to misdirect.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made me wonder, is this fan service or is this no, Bella is the Wonder Horse and She actually is an integral part of the pattern because I mean she outruns these Trollocs and she's calm through it all. It's very unnatural.
Well, and that's the part that there's a slight plot hole with that if it was on purpose, because she did that in book one, but we find out later that it was because Rand was using the
Yep.
power to
Yep.
urge her along unconsciously. So we don't have that here. So just because she did it once doesn't mean she can do it in this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or is it having the horn there is pulling the pattern? The horn itself is kind of pulling the pattern around it, almost like the horn itself is Tavarin.
Well, and we also have a lot of situations with Ulver where he does random things like Matt does and ends up in part of the mix in the action.
Mhm.
Maybe Ulver is
Well,
one of
there's
these
a lot of
threads that,
speculation
yeah.
that he is Geidel Kane reborn.
Yeah, but I thought that was deep. No, because Geidel Kane shows up at this battle.
I couldn't remember if he did. So we'll
Well,
see in
we'll
a
find out in a
second.
second. Yeah, we'll find out in a
Yeah.
second.
Next chapter. But I had forgotten that she dies. And
Brigitte?
yeah, no, Bella.
Oh, Bella. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. As no, I remember the Brigitte part. No, grumble mumble. But
Well, but that was
man,
to
what a
set up
nice
something
moment.
that was important.
Yeah, but what a nice moment of Oliver grabbed the horn and found that he was weeping. I'm sorry, he said to Bella. You were a good horse. You ran like wind couldn't have. I'm sorry. She whinnied softly and drew a final breath, then died. Oh, ooh.
Almost Atreyu vibes there.
That is, it reminded me of why The Witcher sucks and why the fans love Henry Cavill.
Hmm.
Because that was one of the only good moments in that series. And he's the one who fought for it because they wanted to make a joke out of Roach dying. And he was the F you will. This isn't a joke. It's not going to be a joke to the fans. They certainly aren't going to like it. And to the character, to Geralt, this isn't a joke.
Hmm.
It needs to be a real moment. And I'm pretty sure he wrote that scene himself after he fought for it and finally got the idiot showrunners and directors to say, oh, fine, whatever, and then just the best scene in the whole freaking series. Um,
I don't know. Oh, fuck. Was a good scene.
there's a lot of those, and that
Yeah.
that that gets reused so much in Nerdrotic and Drinker and the other guys they
Yeah.
watch, is they use that so much because it's so apropos. Um, and then we get back to the Logain scene where he confronts Demandred, which we've already talked about.
Yeah, and you had talked about him having an advantage, and this is I didn't elaborate, but when he struck him with lightning and it went down, were you talking about something that did that for him, or?
No, 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 no. I was talking about Demandred uh recognizing the rings, but I thought he also recognized the medallion, that he recognized something that would make weaves dissipate. But I may have been mistaken. I may have been mixing up the rings and the medallion. So
Hmm.
if anyone remembers for sure, Scott or Ideals, if you remember for sure, I thought he recognized the dissipation of the medallion when he fought Galad, but I may have been mixing those two things up. Um, the lightning one was pretty cool, but I also like the way Egwene deals with it here in her section of, you know what, I'm strong in earth. I'm just gonna pull iron out of the ground and make myself a lightning rod.
Yeah.
I love that. Um, so we get a nice Egwene moment. I I love her battle with Taim. I think it's well done. Um, and then we get a nice Hurin scene. And this is this is why I'm ranting about we need more of these with shorter and more people. It's not very long. It's just barely over a page long, and it does something. It's not just that, hey, remember this guy? that we've seen a couple of times. It was, um, here it is. Yeah, it's 775 for me. Um, yeah, here it is. And he's thinking, have to buy time for Lord Rand. Keep fighting, keep fighting. Why? Lord Rand had come to him, making apologies to him. Well, Hurin would do him proud. The Dragon Reborn did not need the forgiveness of a little thief taker, but Hurin still felt as if the world had righted itself. Lord Rand was Lord Rand again. Lord Rand would preserve them if they could give him enough time. So it's not just that we're being reminded of someone we haven't seen in a long time, all these so many minor characters that, like I said, Jordan's great gift in writing. Yes, the story is incredibly complex and interesting, but what makes it so good is that it is a complex, interesting story with complex, real people. Even if they're a very minor character, this is a real human being that you can relate to.
Yeah, to your point about bringing people back, but when we talk about minor character, if you were to evaluate screen time, book by book, in book two, he's probably top 10 in screen time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's there a lot and then he kind of disappears. But the other thought I had when I was reading this section is another show don't tell is we get a hint that one of the kind of just rabble that shows up is the freaking farmer that he got a ride in the back of his wagon from Andor, which
Mm-hmm.
remember is the farmer with the apple scene because that was like I think his sister whose husband had died and he had gone up there near Tarvalon to her orchard to help. Jordan talked about the complexity of the pattern. That's why one of its names is the age lace. And if you've ever seen true handcrafted lace, and it's a freaking snowflake, it is incredibly complex, which is why it's so cool that people can do this by hand. Especially
Mm-hmm.
if you aren't a crafty person, when you see someone draw or paint something intricate or weave, you know, needle and thread something by hand intricate, and it's awesome. Well, this would show us the age lace when if we would see more of the people that not just ran, but remember, all three of them are Tavarin. If we would see more of the people that Rand and Perrin and Matt had drawn to them through their adventures, and it would be nice to, oh yeah, that guy. Oh, he's in the last battle. Of course he is, because everyone's in the last battle, because it's the last battle, you know?
Well, we get that in Perrin's section with the guy he helped us. Or I guess he talked to the frog face innkeeper with it, but he met him in
Mm-hmm.
the wolf dream
Mm-hmm.
as a wolf. Was it Gnome or
It
yeah,
was Gnome's brother. I
Gnome's
can't
brother?
remember his
Yeah,
name.
no, yeah.
Yeah, but no, Gnome was the frog face. Then he felt bad about
Mm-hmm.
thinking of him that way because he was such a nice guy. Um, yeah. Uh, yeah. Then we switch to a Bearlane point of view, which is pretty good, and it's a really good moment to let the audience breathe and rest from all the battle, but not rest from the emotion because it's still a very emotional section. But also very good of, oh geez, again, back to the minor characters of Honora has been around for a while, but hasn't played a critical role,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, until now. She feels she has this connection with Bearlane that they're more than just queen and advisor. They're more than just monarch and Aes Sedai. There's a friendship there. And we are shown that friendship because holy crap, Honora burnt herself out to make a gateway to get Galad off the battlefield because she knew how much Bearlane cared for her.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. You know,
Well, luckily for Honora, all you need is for some of these Asha men to
I,
survive who know how to
yes,
put
I,
that
I,
back together.
I love that well, maybe someone can heal it. You never know. But we're not shown that. We don't know if it happens,
Well,
but
and we
it's
don't
it's
know if
left open
Honora
to your
knows that because
imagination.
she was with the Perrin timeline, not with
Yeah.
the timeline Rand's company, which is where
Are
they were learning. Sorry for the hiccup there. My power cord had come out of my computer, and instead
Mhm.
of telling me you have such and such percentage left, it just turned off. So this was not another Alex Jones moment. This was
All right.
Sam sucks with technology moment.
Well, just not exactly sure when it cut me off there, but just to wrap up what I was saying, I like that Bearlane has the thought of maybe someone can heal her, and we the reader know that it's possible, but it's left open ended of we don't know when or if or how. It's just it's just one of those things that in the fourth age, maybe it does, maybe it
Hmm.
doesn't. But I like that we don't know. He doesn't answer all the questions.
I would assume being where she is in a place of relative power, being Bear Lane's second and having the connections, and also there's going to be a lot of yellows here in where she's at.
Yep. The
Somebody's
the
got to know something from somewhere in the
the
grapevine.
more interesting thought is are enough people going to talk to each other? The meme of the graph of conflict in the wheel of time, and it's 90 something percent people not communicating with each other
True,
is
true. Yeah, because she may stick to the old tradition of nobody talks about being burned out. And
well, no, actually, no. Where I was going is, are they going to figure out that for some reason, if you're healed by the opposite, then you're healed back to your full strength. But if you're healed by the same power, the same sex, you come back weaker for some reason.
I think based on the theme of the Pavara storyline
Hmm.
and the Cadsuin storyline, where actually Cadsuin would know. So Cadsuin would know that this is something that's possible by the males.
Oh, that's a good
So
point. Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
I think based on that thread, we can assume Honora's going to be okay, but she doesn't know that, and so we can still have that same point of she committed what would be considered the ultimate sacrifice, probably worse than
yeah.
dying.
All right, so then we switch back to Rand, and we don't have another scene, another mirror being weaved yet. It's just the Dark One attacking him, basically attacking his essence and using the emotional weakness. I'm using scare quotes here because that's he's not actually weak. I think that's part of the point of this is Rand is simply in this void seeing these threads end. And so he's seeing the lives, and this is where we see we aren't shown, we're just told Davram Bashir and his wife is um they're dying. But what I think is so interesting and critical here, but also very subtle, which again is why I think RJ himself wrote or mostly wrote these scenes, is because it's very subtle here. Rand cried out at the fall of his friend. He wept for Davram Bashir. This is fully realized Rand. This is not the Rand of before his moment on Dragon Mount, because this is manly emotion. You talked about masculine versus feminine way when we were talking about Oliver, and yeah, it's okay to cry. We joke about whether there's only two times it's acceptable for a man to cry. Accidentally cut something off with a chainsaw. No, you can't cry. You know, uh, but it's okay to tear up at the end of Field of Dreams. But you know, jokes like that. There are moments where a man, but it's not just the moment; it's the way. It's he's crying. He is mourning for his friend. And I think that the insertion of that word, this isn't his general, this isn't his subordinate, this isn't, a dragon sworn follower of the dragon. This is Rand the man's friend. And he's weeping for him. And we see, we go through a couple of others of one of the Congers, even Gawain, he's weeping for Gawain. You know, to me, this is a very subtle way of Jordan um showing us the evolution of Rand, but then also showing us the deviousness of the Dark One. Because what is the attack this time? What is you know the method of attack? I love the line here towards the end. Why keep fighting? Stop fighting and rest. And the thing it made me think of is I've never been this far into it, but people who know talk about when you get into the late stages of hypothermia,
Mm,
the danger is you stop feeling cold. You actually feel warmth. And there is a blissful feeling, and almost euphoric feeling of everything's fine. I'm just going to lay down here. And that's when you're dead. Is if
mm.
you give into that feeling of, I'm just going to lay down and take a little nap. Nope, nope. You ain't going to wake up. Now, I have been to the extreme of, oh crap, I need to go inside because my extremities, my hands, and my nose and my ears aren't hurting anymore. And that's my cue of time to go inside. You
Yeah,
know,
and so anybody who's done ice plunge challenges, you probably bathe like this isomorphic, but I did
with with your bear pet.
yeah, I did 30 minutes with still floating ice in there, so we're getting it's close. You can't get freezing. People are like, "Oh, it's frozen." No, you can't get freezing or it wouldn't be liquid. But as close to that as you can get where there's still floating ice in there for 30 minutes. And you you get in a zone and you kind of get there, but then you get out and your body says, I need to warm up again. And it hyper responds and you go into this severe total body shiver. And when you go through that for about 4 hours after you got out of the plunge, you're like, dude, how close was I to hypothermia? I don't know, but I couldn't feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've mentioned I was rewatching the first several seasons of Deadliest Catch. And that's one of the things they talk about, especially during the second season, the OP season, because that's even colder than the king crab season. And they all talk about you're in the first stages of hypothermia, just and you don't even know it
Mhm.
when you're outside.
Well, especially when it comes on slowly, a lot of people don't realize that people in the more tropical regions, like Hawaii, that spend a lot of time in the water die of hypothermia because 75-degree water is
Yeah,
still colder than body temperature.
yeah.
And it slowly, slowly conducts out of you because conduction is better than convection. And it slowly conducts out of you so you don't notice it coming on. Whereas if you jump in the freezing water, well, you notice it
Oh,
about second one.
oh yeah,
And
I know because whenever I go to Hawaii, I turn back into an 8-year-old, and my wife is yelling at me, "We need to go just 5 more minutes, 5 times." And by the time I get out, I'm shivering, and I wasn't when I was in the water because I didn't know I was in a homeostasis, and then I get outside, and you hit the air, and your body gets, hey, you were in there way too long. You start shivering. Sun's out, it's 80 something degrees, and you're shivering. Yeah.
yeah, and
Um.
we're equipped as humans to handle that with convection, which is the air. But we lose a little bit of it when we get in the
Mhm.
water because it's just so much faster of a transfer.
Yeah. Um. Then we switch to a Taim point of view as he goes back to Demandrid and complains that well he can't kill the Amarillan seat because she's got a really powerful sangreal, and Demandred hands over his sangreal, which is whoa, dude. Um, but the interesting thing to me is that he has this thought that Demandred looks tired, and his thinking is where is it down here on 781 for me, uh several paragraphs down from this section, um, starting with Mahel passed between suspicious Sharans with their strange dress and tattoos. Demandred sat cross-legged at their center. His eyes closed, he breathed in and out slowly. That sangreal he used, it took something out of him, something more than just the normal strength required for channeling. And I again, much like with Honora, and we don't know if she's healed. We know she can be, but we don't know. And I love this nice little nugget of what the heck is going on here? Is this something akin to Kalendor? That this sangria was made in a hurry or by someone who didn't have the full knowledge, and so it's flawed? Or is this something else? Or is Taim wrong? And this is just Demandred recentering himself, him going into the void or whatever. We don't know.
Well, Isomorphic brought that up, the comparison to Kalendor, several episodes ago. But actually, we learned from a lot of Varen point of view and on a Elaine point of view, because she's got the gift for making Turin is the shape and purpose of the item actually plays a big role.
Oh, that's
And,
that's a good point.
and we have a sword and a sword. Maybe a killing weapon is
Well,
actually the worst vessel to make a sangreal.
this is a scepter.
Oh, it's a scepter?
Mhm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, Demandred held out his scepter with the golden goblet affixed atop it. Um, and then Demandred says, because Mahel licked his lips, and if the Dragon Reborn finally comes to you, Demandred laughed. You think I would use this to fight him? What would that prove? Our strengths must be matched if I am to show myself the better. By all accounts, he cannot use Kalendor safely, and he foolishly destroyed the Coden Call. He will come, and when he does, I will face him unaided and prove myself the true master of this realm. Darkness within, Time thought. He's gone completely mad, hasn't he? Strange to look into those eyes, which seem so lucid, and hear complete insanity from his lips. I I love that moment of you're bat crap crazy, and yet you don't look crazy. Um, because to
Well,
Demandred,
because
he's
I
not.
think I think Taim's a true psychopath is the problem.
That too.
He's horrible at reading other people's emotion.
Hmm.
And Demandred is he narcissistic, but he does harbor a lot of emotion.
Yeah, I'm just looking up because this where does this come from? There's a big entry. The hell? There's a big entry for this sangreal in the wiki.
Hmm.
Um, all right, so I'm glad I looked this up, but also annoyed now because now I've got to try and track this down to read it. But the reason there's such a long entry for Sakarnin, which is the name of the scepter, which means causer or instrument of great punishment in the Old Tongue, also known as Djet or simply the scepter during the Age of Legends, is a male sangreal used by the forces of the Shadow during the last battle. And the reason we know all this is because there is a short story that was published in an anthology. The short story is titled River of Souls, and it is mostly scenes that were cut for various reasons from the final book, whether because of flow or because Harriet didn't think they worked for the whole novel or whatever. But they are mostly scenes of Demandred from his perspective while in Shara. So that to me is really interesting because that's going to explain why and how he went native as Taim thinks. Um, and so this was an item that was known to him because, as it said, it was used by the Shadow, and so he when he woke, he went looking for it, and that's presumably one of the reasons he ended up in Shara is because that's where he found it, and this item of power was linked to their prophecies of the wild. So now I'm really intrigued to go track this down
Mm-hmm.
and to read it. But it's not known, so it doesn't say, it's left open, which again, I like that there's so many things left open. Demandred claims to Taim, if you try and use that again, it's attuned to me. is
Hmm.
the word he uses. And if you try and use it against me, it'll burn you from the pattern.
Yeah, the companion says bound to him. So
Yeah. But uh, uh, according to the wiki, at least in the story, it's not explained if that's true or not. So is Demandred bluffing? But Demandred being Demandred, I could see it either way
yeah.
of him
It
being confident enough to bluff, or no, I have taken steps to make sure this can't be used against me.
yeah, in the companion, it doesn't say appears or anything. It says it was bound to him. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's supposed to be.
It also, at least in the wiki, it doesn't look like it it explains if it actually does take something more out of you or not. It
Hmm.
just mentions that Taim notices it and thinks that it takes something more out of you, but we don't know. So that's interesting to me. All right.
Well, if it's bound to him, usage is usage, and it might be aging him.
Hmm. There's a thought. Yeah, because it does use the term bound, not attuned
Hmm.
in the companion. So maybe the bound is more
Well,
meaningful there.
and Demandred himself says bound. He uses the word bound as well.
Oh, okay. I thought he said it attuned.
No,
Okay.
uh, no. Taim in his
Oh,
own
that's what
head said,
Taim thinks. Yeah,
"Yeah."
yeah, yeah.
Taim said, "Can it be attuned to a specific person?" And he said,
You,
"No, do not
yep,
channel
yep,
that
yep.
towards me. I have bonded Sakarnan to me."
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Then we get an Elaine chapter, which would be impactful, except all I could do was roll my eyes and say, "See, I told you so." Because at the very end of it, when Malar shows up with some Ashaman or some male channeler, and they're going to literally cut out her twins out of her and just leave her to die. And the channeler says, "Yeah, I can keep them alive, but we have to hurry because I don't know how long I can keep them alive." And oh, hey, look, the truth of men's visions, which was directly pointed out to you repeatedly by Brigitte and Avienda of,
Mm.
hey, you realize that what men said could mean this or this or this or this. And this was one of those things that was pointed out. The babes surviving doesn't mean you do.
So, rewind just a minute. It's for me, it's 872, but it's right at the beginning there, a couple paragraphs down. Brigitte has a moment where she turned away. I swear I once remembered a situation like this.
Yeah.
If you want to center yourself there. Elaine's thought after that pissed me off because she said her jaw, she found Brigitte's loss of memory heart-wrenching, but it was only one woman's problem. Thousands of her people were dying. My thought on that was, Ag, your throne was only one woman's problem, and thousands of people died to get it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so again, I don't know if this is on purpose. I don't know if Sanderson didn't like Elaine or if Jordan intended to kind of make her an unlikable anti-hero quasi-villain. Is this a was this a purposeful power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? Because think about the girl that we first meet and that we see along the way, and that is the daughter heir who is willing to put on tights and go perform as an acrobat because that's what's needed and because she wants to have an adventure. And now and then when she starts to go after the throne, she becomes quite the queen bee
Mm-hmm.
and uncaring about other people, because that could have been written so much differently and so much more empathetically, both from Elaine's point of view, but then also for the reader. Because if Elaine is struggling with this of, damn it, this is my warder, this is my friend, I wish I could do something, but I can't, I have to focus on this, and that's adding to her burden, then that would be a moment of true character connection. And ouch, you would feel for both of them there. But now you feel for Brigitte and you look at Elaine and go, what the hell happened to you, woman?
Yeah, this is why the Western world has gone away from feudal succession wars because there is a better way.
Mm.
And yeah, they were all baddies. They just thought they were the less baddie, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And she's a baddie right here.
Oh, gee, I mean, one of the best examples is Henry VIII. How many wives did he have executed? And yet he was also a he was very bipolar because he was also a deeply religious person who
Well, he just
um
changed the church so he could
well no but
have his
but
way.
that actually is so that adds to the layers of how much of this was you just being a psychopathic totalitarian and how much of this was set up in your early years where he entertained and he protected and he learned from people that were considered heretics by the Catholic Church. And then later I think he allowed some of those people to be burnt at the stake. But so again, wow, what what the heck is wrong with you, man? You know, same thing here. Um, then we switch back to Rand. We'll deal with Elaine and Brigitte later. Uh, the thing that jumps out at me in this very short, it's barely a page section, is the layers that Jordan creates. Okay, because I don't know how much of that scene between Rand and Tam Jordan wrote, but it felt very Jordan, both in the perspective and in the action because of the way he wrote the sparring. And it makes me think that that too was something that he thought, I need to make sure I have this because this is pivotal. And I want to make sure this is pivotal to the story, but also pivotal to me, the person and the author. Um, what is one of the attacks that the Dark One uses here? Nothingness. So
Mm-hmm.
he offers Rand, as Rand points out. So this is the deal you offer to Lon, isn't it? Nothingness. Um, you promised him an into existence. I offer it to you too, the Dark One replied, and to all men. You wanted peace? I give it to you. So again, the deviousness, the allure of, hey, just rest, man. Same thing here. Just hey, this is peace.
As
There's no
Dawkins would put
war,
it, after he
no
dies, he'll just
conflict.
be under a general anesthesia.
There's just nothing.
Yeah.
But here's where the layers come in. The peace of the void that you so often seek. This is why it mattered so much that he have that final lesson with Tam, because no, son, that's not what the void is. It's life.
Mm-hmm.
You think it's nothingness. No, 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 no. It's life. It is the ultimate embrace and understanding of life because as we see with that Tam scene where he becomes the void, he doesn't just embrace it, he becomes the void, and he is the reed blowing in the wind. So that is why Rand had to learn that lesson because it was going to be one of the attacks of the Dark One.
Which leads to the next paragraph, which is exactly what the oneness or the nothingness of Buddhism is.
Mm.
What is the first thing Rand did? He did not reject the offer immediately. He grasped the offer and cradled it in his mind.
He
It's
considered
not
it.
about avoiding emotion. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about acknowledging the emotion and say, what are you doing here? And are you important or are you intrusive? And he did that right there and said, no, you're intrusive.
Yep. And so then ultimately he came to the conclusion of no, and into existence is not peace. I may Now this is what is interesting to me. I may go, wait a minute. Is Rand talking about himself, Rand, because he in his darker moments he you could see how this would apply to him, or maybe and or because of this place where Rand is and his ability to see time backwards and forwards and current, does Rand know that in one of his incarnations as the avatar of the creator, did he actually make this choice? And so everything ended, and then the creator eventually remade creation.
Hmm.
We don't know, but I do find it interesting that he says, I made this choice before. We will continue.
See, I read that as in he made the choice to continue before. He was given that choice and he chose to continue. But at the same time, this is where I would have liked a little, it just would have taken one line because this is when Rourke and Avienda and all of the Aiel said he has embraced death.
Mm,
And this was the moment of that because it's not wanting to die, it's knowing that you could die, but you're still going to fight to live.
hmm.
And he made the choice to fight to live, even though it
Yeah.
wasn't everything you want it to be. And death actually is very attractive. So wanting to die is different than embracing death. And Jordan made a big point of that for
Yeah.
10 books. And this would have been in the moment to wrap that back in there and how the Aiel actually played their part in saving the world.
I've mentioned it before, but if you haven't watched it, I think it's still available on Netflix. If you have Netflix, go watch Godzilla Minus One
I still haven't
because
watched it.
the main character is a kamikaze pilot at the very end of the war. And so
Okay.
he manages to survive. And it is a big theme in that movie. It's incredible.
Okay. I
Yeah.
can't commit to a series right now, but I can commit to a movie. So I'll
Yeah.
try to watch that this
And
weekend.
if you want a movie to watch with the wife, I think both of you would both go whoa and have very interesting and different takes on the themes of the movie. Um, all right. Then we switch to men, and again, credit where it's due. This is a masterfully written section of I love the cold logic from the Sanshin, and each character is in character. It makes sense that Golgan would think this and would be saying the things that he's saying. It makes sense that Tawan is going to be sitting there listening and running through her own thoughts and not committing to anything just yet. It makes sense that Tylee says what she says because we've met her before. Yulan is the one that stands out a little bit. And it you can understand where he's coming from, but he is a little forceful there. So then it makes sense that men would focus on him and see is there anything going on there? And oh yeah, there's a vision there, and I intuitively know what that means. So I love all the characters in this scene, and I really love Min's point of view. I loved her train of thought. So again, we were ranting about telling and not showing. Well, now he shows us.
Hmm.
He does a very good job of showing us. Yeah, all those books Min has been reading from that incomprehensibly esoteric philosopher. Yeah, this is how she was able to read those and get through them because she's got a mind that can work like this.
Hmm.
So I love the way she plays this.
Which would be necessary to be able to see the pattern of fate and stay semi-sane your entire life.
Yes, that's a very good point. And then also be able to I hadn't thought about this either, but you bring that up and makes me realize it's not just her train of thought and figuring out, okay, how do I find this spy? Probably a channeler. Channelers always have auras around them. Let me find someone with auras that don't go away. The servants. I didn't even think to look for them. I should be looking at the servants, not just the nobles and the soldiers. Let me
Hmm.
look at the servants.
Well, I mean, it's the trend of actual good philosophers. If you really break down the history of philosophy, uh, pattern recognition. We have the weave, we have the pattern. She recognizes the pattern. That's why she can see it. Heraclides understood our bodies remodeling constantly
Hmm.
without knowing anything about an atom.
With millennia away from cell theory,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
right?
yeah, he called it flux and fire, but at the same time, he was correct. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the final thing was something of his age, but if you look at the overall philosophy, it's like, yeah, actually, you're just talking about the fact that we're remodeling constantly
Mm-hmm.
and that every 7 years, every single atom in my body is different. So, yeah, the same man doesn't walk in the same river twice.
Well, that actually uh bolsters where I was going, which was that the thought that just popped into my head was that the end here, her street smarts, she's just using her street smarts, but then elevating it to make it work in this court setting in the way that, all right, I figured out the answer here, but I have to figure out how to convince Tawan too. It's not enough to know the answer. I have to figure out how to make the answer work. And the way she kind of manipulates the situation and doesn't just manipulate Tawan, but manipulates the whole court by showing who the traitor is. And it's because I can't just tell you, I have to show you or it won't work. And the way she comes to that conclusion, and then the way what she does, how she executes her plan. And then I love the way it ends with Tawan complimenting her of, you play these games quite well. And to think that I worried for your safety by bringing you into my court. I should have worried for myself, it appears. You know, I love that we end on a compliment from one of the best players of this game, Tawan, to Min. Um,
Is this the big Egwene scene?
yeah,
Because I'm almost to my bookmark. We're getting close. We're getting close. Do we want to power through?
yeah, we can power through.
Okay. I mean, this gives us the mean for this episode because
I
I've had one I've been ready to use.
I liked this scene better than I remember liking it the first time, maybe the first couple of times I read it, but it still is kind of meh
Well,
because it still
I
seems
think
like
it's a
comes out of
good
nowhere.
yeah, I think it's a good moment, but yeah, it comes out of nowhere, and I think it's actually very chaotically written, where you're kind of bouncing around in your mind of what's happening.
You know what I think it is? It just occurs to me is Sanderson does a good job of through several scenes working through the thought process, reminding Egwene one of the last things we see from RJ because it happens at the end of Knife of Dreams when the Sanchin are attacking the White Tower. It's just a weave. I mean, it's so freaking one of the great Perrin moments. It's just a weave. Guys, I can explain. You guys survive. Oh, jeez.
There's either that one. Keep talking. I'll get the other one.
Yeah. Um, so that part is good, but I think the disconnect for me is I don't think Sanderson, because he didn't create it. Um, see, I see this as an absolute win. I mean, it is. She goes out like a champ. Because not only does she take out Taim, which is a big effing deal, not only in the way she does it, she neutralizes that sawing reel, so Demandred can't get it back. Um, as we find out later at the end here, when Matt is getting the reports, she takes out all of the Sharan channelers. Yeah, the Aes Sedai lost like half their number, which is a big effing deal now
All the
and going
Sharan
forward to the
channelers
Fourth
that were
Age.
with Taim, because Demandrew still has his troop.
Yes, yeah. So all of the channelers there on that battle, so the only ones left are the ones the immediate bodyguard of Demandred. So she took out all of those channelers, which had to include some Dreadlords, some Ashaman as well, some former Ashaman. She took them all out. But I think the reason it's so meh to me is because what isn't built up is maybe what Sanderson couldn't build up. What was there not enough in the notes or what? But Sanderson didn't create this magic system. That is something I will give him credit for. Of yes, I don't think he writes well enough to be memorable because I literally can't remember the books I've read, and I know I've read 3 or 4 of them. Again, I can't even remember if it was 3 or 4. I just know I've read some. But I do remember finding his magic system in at least one of those stories interesting. You know, a very unique, but then also very well fleshed out in the world. So there are rules so that you know these are the rules, this is how it works. I think that's the failing here is there was no buildup for the weave that she uses.
Hmm.
All right. Yeah, there's buildup in her mind of no, this isn't right. There has to be balance. There has to be a balance to balefire.
She makes those crystals in the darkness, and it's related to this. So there's a slight buildup
Crystals.
when she channels into the crack.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that. She does do a proof of concept basically when she's
Mhm.
examining the crack and she channels something intuitively, but I completely forgot because why the hell wasn't that connected back in this moment? And then give us at least a little bit. You don't have to fully explain things like you're doing a physics proof here,
Hmm.
but at least give us enough to know, oh,
Well, I think that's one of the
maybe this is
failings
how
to
it
this
works.
so many points of view all coalescing at once is that was there, but it's so easily forgotten because immediately you jump to Min, immediately you jump to
Yeah.
Fael, immediately you jump to Hurin and Jylen and da 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 da.
Mm-hmm. Uh, I love that when she knows it's her time of, well, I'm going to be burnt out anyway. So I'm just going to go out like a champ, but I'm not taking you with me. And she throws Leywin through a gateway and then releases the bond. It's just the cherry on top of her death scene of crap. This makes me want to rewatch the 13th Warrior, or at least rewatch the end scene of "Lo, there do I see my father." Where the big buff dude comes out. Yeah, he's poisoned, he's dying, but he's going to go out swinging his big honking sword because he's a man. Damn it, she's a woman. Damn it, and she's going to go out like a champ. Um, and we get a very short scene of, which is fitting that not her. Of even though their life didn't go the way they anticipated, um, Rand would feel this maybe most keenly of all
Mhm.
because of his connection to Egwene. So I think it's fitting and necessary that we have a reaction moment from him. And
Well,
then,
and this is where he needs to grow up a little bit too, because his reaction
mm,
is not her uh because she was killed, but she sacrificed herself.
yeah,
You know, he's not getting that in the moment.
um, we get a couple other short scenes, blah 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 blah. And then we switch back to Matt getting reports from Arganda, who's too beat up to continue fighting, so he's basically his chief of staff now.
Hmm.
Um, I like that we also get a bit of Matt, to your point, the way he handles it versus the way Rand handles it. Now, in his defense, Rand's dealing with an awful lot right now. And
Well, so is
the,
Matt.
yeah, the way the Dark One is able to attack him seems much more personal, much more mental. Um, and Matt is a little more removed from the moment, but still, I do love the way he responds to it. Of you know, blood and bloody ashes. Matt thought Egwene, not Egwene too. It hit him like a punch in the
I
face.
was about to say removed. That's flesh to flesh. That's close. A punch
He
to the
is
face is
physically
a saying
closer. Yeah,
for a reason. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but then to your point about what Rand needs to focus on here is Matt grunted. How many of the Shard Channelers did they take? He asked, bracing himself. All of them. Matt looked at Arganda and frowned. What? All of the Channelers, all the ones that were fighting the Aes Sedai. That's something Matt said. But Egwene, dot, dot, dot. I love that of Matt the General is holy hell. Damn, good job. But you've been my friend since we were kids.
Hmm.
This sucks. That I love just the ellipses, just the trail. I mean, there are no words. What do you say? There's just what do you even think, in that moment. So I do like that reaction. All right. Then we switch through a couple more scenes as the final showdown is coming. Um, and Lan charges off on his own. All right. And as I've been kind of griping for I don't know how long, whenever we would bring up this scene, I don't dislike it as much as I did as I remember the first time or two I read it because I'm reading more critically going through. And so you can see some of the build up to it, but Lan isn't an idiot. No, he's not one of the great captains, but we know he knows war.
Mm-hmm.
RJ showed it to us in the way that he very subtly prodded Matt into revealing the whole plan. And Lan was in on that planning for the battle in front of Karheen against the Shido. Lan knows battle, not just the personal fight, but war.
Mm-hmm.
If he was going to do something like, I mean, you see from his point of view when you switch to it, which for me is on page 802, he knows he can't get through. He knows even if I manage to, push the spear aside and make it through the spear line, I kill one or two Trollocs, the rest close around me, and then I can't maneuver, and they kill my horse and they drag me down. He isn't this dumb, and he absolutely knows what the Two Rivers bows can do.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't he set up ahead of time? Hey, Tam, get your archers ready. He wouldn't have even had to tell them what he's doing, but Tam, get your archers ready. You know, because that is how he makes it through, is that the longbowmen clear him a path by dropping arrows in front of him. And this is one of the problems with creating too dire a scenario. Like, one of my favorite movies, one of I think the best movies ever, is The Empire Strikes Back. And it ends on a very down note. The good guys lost. The good guys lost at the end of that. But there is still a hopeful note because they haven't been vanquished.
Mm-hmm.
And you know from what you saw in the first movie and what you saw in this movie, they have the skills that they can still fight. So it's not a complete surprise when they win in the end in the next movie. If you make your situation too dire because you want that epic moment, you're reaching too much for that epic moment, well, then it just becomes Deus Ex Machina. And it's, well, yeah. The example I thought of is if you read any of the Sherlock Holmes stories or watched any of them when you were a kid, and then you go back and you reread them and you go, oh, Doyle actually wasn't that great of a writer. The spin-offs of Holmes are actually better than Holmes itself, because the reason Holmes knows the answer is because he's the author. Doyle does not do a good job of, to me, a really good mystery is, like Psych is obviously a Holmes homage. House is a very obvious Holmes homage. And the clues are there. They might be hard to see, but the clues are there if you can spot them and if you can connect the dots. Doyle doesn't do that in his stories. There's no way you can know unless you have outside knowledge.
But
There's
it's
no way
elementary,
you
my
can.
friend.
Yeah, but it's not. It's elementary because you know the answers because you're the author. And that's the example I thought of with this moment of, if you make the scene too dire, it's like making a mystery too complicated without enough clues for the reader to see.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, hey, Holmes figured it out. Well, of course he figured it out because the author knew the answer going in. There's another problem I have here before we actually get to the end, which is on the next page, 803 for me, is how the effing hell does Demandred not know who Lan is? The Shadow sure knows who Lan is. Trollocs
Mm-hmm.
sure know who Lan is. How does Demandred not know who Lan is? Yes.
Yeah. There's so many we could use for this one. It's
Yes. It's going to be hard to pick a thumbnail because, yeah, Nynaeve sent an army so Lan wouldn't fight alone. And he fights with that army. And we kind of griped about how long it takes him to accept the army, but he finally accepts it and he's fighting with them. And again, he's not that dumb. He knows he has an army. He knows, okay, one man might be able to make it to Demandred if here this is how I do this. The way it is set up is so dumb that to me it takes away from the end, which is set all that aside and just get to the actual duel. And holy crap, that's actually good.
yeah.
If you just look at the last couple of pages of this chapter and you ignore all the rest of that, that's good. Um, and this is to Ideal's point is there's kind of a buildup here because Lan is the synthesis of both of them. Gawain got distracted by the banter. Galad was too cold, too removed. Lan is the man. He is the void. He is doing what Tam showed us. You know, when he gave that great compliment to Tam of, I often wondered where that heron blade come from and if he'd earned it, and now I know. You know, that's high praise from Lan.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what Lan is doing here. And ignoring for the fact that Demandred should know who he is, but the reason Demandred doesn't is because, but Demandred could still know who Lan is, and this line still work, which is simply, I am just a man, Lan whispered. That is all I have ever been. One more reason to cancel Jordan, because how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, way back when I don't remember how long ago, it may have been the Eye of the World when you first made it, because that scene where Nynaeve sneaks up on them,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of the first scene where you see there might be a little something there between Lan and Nynaeve. And you made the point somewhere along the way that, well, it makes sense that Nynaeve ends up with Lan because she is the most masculine female and he is the most masculine man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is what he is saying here is, I'm just a man. That is all I've ever been. That's all I've ever wanted to be. And that's enough, damn it. You know, screw your powers, screw your centuries, if not millennia of life in the Age of Legends. I'm a man and I'm here to do what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. And at the end, we get into what we didn't elaborate on earlier is the advantage he had wasn't that he was a better swordsman.
Mm-hmm.
It's the line, I did not come here to win. I came here to kill you.
Yes, you weren't listening.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Again, in a vacuum, those last couple of pages of the chapter are awesome. And
Well,
it made
and
me
then
think,
that goes back to book 2 when Rand is fighting Turok, the true swords blade master, and it was the fact that he embraced death to beat the swords master was why he won, not anything having to do with his skill.
I hadn't thought of that, but that's a good point and another good moment of building because the fact that he finally embraced death there against Turok is how he was able to, again, full circle back to where it all set up back in book 2, sheathing the sword. That's what Lan does here at the end of book 14 is, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do what I taught my student a long time ago, and now it's my turn.
Mm-hmm.
Another great moment of because he embraced death with Turok, he was able to do it even more fully with Balsamon and defeat Ishii by taking that wound in his side to drive his own sword home and drive in the killing blow. Um, but the thing that popped into my head with that line of "I am just a man, that is all I have ever been" is a quote that took me forever to find because I kept thinking it was Tolkien. It's actually C.S. Lewis. Um, and it is from an essay he wrote addressing objections to fairy tales of so this idea that the idea of deconstructing that's been around forever. You terrible modern writers, you aren't new. It's just all part of postmodernism, which has been around for a long time. And so C.S. Lewis was addressing this idea that children shouldn't read fairy tales for this, that, or other reasons. And there's this marvelous quote from him in that essay. Since it is likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you are making their destiny not brighter, but darker. That is why we have these stories, and that is why they matter. That is why Jordan Peterson did a whole series of not just old stories, but then also some more specifically the Old Testament stories, the stuff in Genesis of what does Cain and Abel tell us about human beings? What does it tell us about us and who we are and who we can be, both good and bad, depending on which way we go? And
I
that
would
is what.
love to. I would love to see him do a series on Aesop's fables
Mm,
or the Canterbury Tales.
yeah,
Lots of dark lessons in those.
but also some light if you look for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is where we end the chapter called "The Last Battle," because ultimately it's the denouement. It's the falling action after this. Is Demandred has finally been killed. Not just their general, but also by far their most powerful weapon. I mean, we have been seeing this whole chapter what he can do when he starts unleashing balefire and lightning and stuff on there. That is why those pike squares are falling apart. It's because he keeps obliterating whole swaths of them. And so now it's okay, can we hang on long enough to survive? All right. Any other final thoughts on this, which we finally made it through? And it's a good place to stop because the next chapter is back to Rand, but then also I love the title of it, The Place That Was Not, which I assume is yeah, where he's been this whole time. The place that was not. It is and isn't. The paradox of it all.
Yeah, that's all I had. We made it through. We got through the last battle.
Yay. Um, so Saturday we will have some who knows what the hell we'll talk about. But one of the things we might talk about, are we gonna watch the fight on Friday night?
Ooh, I'm tempted. I'm very tempted.
I kind of want to, in much the same way that this is why I voted Libertarian in 2016, is to give the boost to it because I would love to see Netflix do more
Hmm.
live events and live sports. And
I mean,
all right,
and there's no reason
you know
not to.
what?
It's free.
I'm already paying for Netflix, so I might as
Yeah.
well. It's not like a pay-per-view on top of, you know. So
Well, and
I'm
there's always
interested to
been the
see.
stink from the purists of sport that these are
Yeah,
spectacles.
yeah.
And I'm like, let people do it. What else is
Sport has
Tyson
always been
doing with his
spectacle.
life,
Yeah,
right? What else
yeah.
is Jake Paul doing with his life? This is what makes them who they are. And we talk about all the we all through
Hmm.
the Wheel of Time stuff and Jordan Peterson, analysis, meaning. Tyson probably is not getting the same meaning from other things he's doing in his life right now
That's a good point.
than he could from here. You would like to see him do something like all my proceeds go to X charity or something like that. But at the same time, he's sitting there basically living in his glory days,
Mm.
thinking, well, maybe I could do that again. And some young whippersnapper says, this will be, I'm going to challenge Mike Tyson. I'm not a professional boxer, but I'm an entertainer, and he's a former professional boxer, was the best at one time. Let's do this. And just watching their training stuff, which I've come across a little bit of it, they're obviously not testing. So, and that's on both of them. So, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
on Mike Tyson's part, you got to give him a little bit
You
of
you
TRT. I
you
mean, he's he's
you
he's
you look at whichever Paul this is, and then look at his
I think it's
brother and
Jake
go,
Paul.
yeah, Logan is the other
Yeah,
one who's
yeah,
even more obnoxious, which is saying something. Um, so I think we will, and we'll talk about it because we amateur fighter, pro fighter, at least a little bit, so we can give the fight analysis of it. But there's also some interesting social analysis to be done here.
yeah. I'm just like,
So
maybe not sanction it in the professional sense, but sanction it in the
mhm.
grown ass men can do what they want that sense, and they can make money doing it.
Yeah,
That's, I guess that is professional technically, but you know what I
yep,
mean.
yep.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see y'all Saturday then.
All right. Later.